My apartment was quiet in the way it gets when the day is finally done and there is nothing left to perform for anyone. I had a mug in my hand, chamomile, steeped a little too long. The steam curled up and disappeared under the kitchen light. I was barefoot on the cool tile, scrolling through my phone with that tired, empty attention you have right before sleep. I hadn't opened the family group chat in months, not out of spite, just habit. I stopped checking it the same way you stop touching a sore tooth. Eventually, you forget it hurts because you stop pressing on it. But that night, my thumb hovered over the notification and I made a small mistake. I tapped it. The most recent message was from my sister, Brianna. No hello. No, hope you're doing okay. No warm-up. Just a screenshot. An invoice. At the top, bold and clean, it said, amount due, $6,000. Under that was a list of vague line items that could have been pulled from thin air. Family support. Shared expenses. Emergency contribution. I stood there reading it again, like the words might rearrange themselves into something reasonable if I stared long enough. Then I typed one sentence. What is this? Brianna replied almost instantly. You owe us. That was it. No explanation, no context. Like I had missed a meeting where we all agreed I was a walking ATM. I looked at the time in the corner of my screen. 10:46 p.m. The condo was so still I could hear my fridge kick on. A soft, mechanical hum, steady and indifferent. The invoice wasn't really about money, not entirely. It felt like a claim, like someone reaching into a life I had built carefully, quietly, over the last decade and tugging at a loose thread to see if it would unravel. I didn't cry. I didn't feel rage. What I felt was colder than that. It was clarity. I set my phone face down on the counter and took one slow sip of tea. It was slightly bitter, the kind of bitter that makes you more awake. Then I walked to my small home office. The light in there was warm, soft. My desk was neat, laptop centered, a pen cup I never used, a stack of mail I kept meaning to sort. I opened my laptop and the screen brightened my face in the dark room. My reflection in the black border looked calm, almost detached. I created a new spreadsheet. Cell A1 blinked like a patient metronome. In the first column, I typed date. Second, service rendered. Third, market value. My hands moved like I'd done this before, and in a way, I had. For years, I had been the quiet fixer, the one who filled gaps, the one who showed up when someone needed a ride, needed help, needed money, needed time, needed a person to absorb their stress so they could keep living like the world would always catch them. I didn't keep receipts. I didn't track hours, but I remembered. I remembered because every time I said yes, something in me had taken note. Not loudly, not dramatically, just recorded. I clicked into the first row and started typing. 4 years ago, August. Brianna had called me in a rush. She had some event for her boutique, a trip out of town, a huge opportunity. She needed someone to watch her kids. I remembered the smell of the scented candle she always burned, the one that tried too hard. I remembered the sticky kitchen counters, the way she handed me the diaper bag like it was a baton in a relay race. Just for the weekend, she'd said. It wasn't the weekend. It was 3 full days and 2 nights. I typed it cleanly. Emergency childcare for boutique travel, 72 hours, $25 HR. I did the math and entered the total, $1,800. I didn't pause. I didn't debate whether it was fair. I kept going. 3 years ago, December, holiday season. Her boutique was slammed. That was the word she used. She needed help packing and shipping orders. She called it just helping the family business. I remembered sitting on her living room floor surrounded by cardboard boxes and tissue paper, my back stiff, my fingers dry from tape, her voice in the background, laughing on FaceTime like the work wasn't happening because of me. I logged it. Inventory plus shipping support, 40 hours, 20 ESHR, $800. The numbers didn't feel emotional. That was the point. They were just numbers. I added another row. 2 winters ago, my dad's car wouldn't start. He called me from a parking lot with that weary, practiced tone that meant he wanted help, but didn't want to ask directly. "I don't know what I'm gonna do," he said. "It's just bad timing." I paid for the repair. It wasn't even a discussion. It was one of those moments where the expectation was already in the room. I typed, "Auto repair paid on behalf of parents. Reimbursement not received. $760. The spreadsheet grew downward, and the cursor kept moving like it was eager. I included the smaller things too, the ones people love to dismiss because they're not a big deal. The 5 separate store runs with my mom for curtains Brianna decided she needed immediately. The way my mom treated my time like it was free because I wasn't married, because I didn't have kids, because I had more flexibility. I listed it as personal driver, errand service, 5 hours, $50 HR, $250. Then the bigger one I'd never forgotten, the $2,000 I transferred to Brianna when she wanted a website built. She told me she'd pay me back after her next big sales month. Her next big sales month came, then another, then another. The website stayed, the debt disappeared. I typed it in with no extra commentary. Loan for website design, principal, $2,000. I sat back for a second and listened to the quiet. The heater clicked on somewhere in the building. A faint whoosh through vents. Outside, a car passed on the street below. Tires on wet pavement. Then nothing again. I kept going. Plane tickets for family emergencies that turned out to be situations everyone knew about weeks in advance, but somehow became urgent when it was time to pay for them. Graduation gifts and birthday gifts that were never reciprocated, not in equal money, not even in effort, not even in a call. And then the part I didn't want to name, but I did anyway in the most neutral language I could manage. The constant availability, the endless late-night problem-solving, the emotional labor of being the person everyone unloaded on, then ignored when the crisis passed. I didn't assign it some dramatic number. I kept it conservative, reasonable, almost understated, because this was not revenge. This was accounting. I looked at the clock again. 11:57 p.m. My tea was cold now. The mug sat untouched at the edge of the desk. I highlighted the column and clicked the sum function. The total appeared at the bottom in a clean, bright number. 13,180. Not a guess, not a feeling, a number. I stared at it longer than I expected to. Not because it shocked me, because it confirmed what I had been living without wanting to say out loud. I saved the file. I didn't name it something dramatic. I named it like it was a document that belonged in a folder. Clark Family Outstanding Balance. Statement PDF. Then I picked up my phone again. The group chat was still open. Brianna's invoice still sitting there like a demand. I tapped the paperclip icon, attached the PDF, and I typed one sentence, plain and calm. Regarding your invoice for $6,000, please see the attached statement of your outstanding balance with me. Once it's settled, we can discuss any future financial support under formal terms. I read it once. No insults, no threats, no speech. Just a boundary written in the language they had chosen first. I hit send at 12:03 a.m. For a moment, nothing happened. Then my phone started vibrating on the desk like it couldn't decide where to land. Brianna calling, my mother calling, then my father, which was rare enough that it almost felt unreal. Notifications stacked up so fast the screen looked like it was strobing. I didn't open any of them. I turned the ringer off, set the phone face down again. I walked back into the kitchen, refilled my water glass, and took one slow drink. My hand didn't shake, and in the quiet, I noticed something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, not fear, just a steady sense that something had finally shifted. Then I waited. I slept better than I expected. Not perfectly. My phone stayed silent only because I kept it on mute, face down on the dresser like a small, contained problem. But the quiet in my body was real. It was the kind of quiet you get after you finally stop arguing with yourself. In the morning, pale sunlight came through the blinds in thin stripes across my bedroom floor. I stood there for a moment in my robe, looking at the light and listening. No TV noise, no voices, no requests, just my place. I made coffee. The grinder buzzed. The smell filled the kitchen in a way that always felt grounding, like the room was reminding me where I was and who I belonged to. Only after the first sip did I pick up my phone. The screen lit up with numbers that looked almost unreal. 19 missed calls, 32 new messages. I didn't open them right away. I didn't need to. I already knew the arc. At first they would act confused, like they couldn't imagine why I'd done what I'd done. Then angry, then wounded. Then eventually, they'd bring out the familiar final tool, the one that had always worked: guilt. I set my phone back down and stared at my sink for a second, at a single spoon I'd left there the night before. I rinsed it, dried it, and put it away. A small, ordinary action. Something simple I could control. That was the thing. For most of my life, the family system didn't allow control. It allowed participation. It allowed service. It allowed sacrifice. It didn't allow a boundary that stood on its own. When I was younger, I thought the dynamic was temporary. I assumed one day it would shift. One day they would notice I wasn't just useful, I was a person. In my early 20s, I still believed in the version of family people talk about like a promise, the version where effort eventually gets recognized. But after enough years, you stop waiting for the recognition and start building a life that doesn't require it. That was what I had done. I had moved away. Not across the country, not dramatically, just far enough that I couldn't be used as an automatic solution for every small disaster. I lived in Charlotte now, in a clean condo I paid for myself. My job was stable, better than stable actually. I worked as a clinical operations coordinator for a healthcare network, the kind of role where you learn to stay calm when systems break, where you learn that documentation matters more than shouting. 2 years earlier, I'd been promoted and relocated. I had told them with quiet pride, like it was something we could share. I remembered that dinner. Their house smelled like roasted chicken and buttery rolls. The TV was on, louder than it needed to be. My mother moved between the kitchen and the living room with a frantic energy, carrying dishes like a performance. My sister sat on the couch, phone in her hand, half watching her kids and half watching herself on screen. She was always selling something, even when she wasn't. I had waited for a pause that never came. Then I said it anyway. I got promoted. My voice was steady, not loud. I didn't make it dramatic. I didn't want a parade. I'm moving to Charlotte. They're putting me in a new position. My mother nodded without looking up from the gravy boat. That's nice, honey, she said, in a tone that meant she hadn't heard a single detail. My father's eyes stayed on the game. My sister's attention stayed on her phone. Then, less than 5 minutes later, my sister announced she'd made $2,000 in sales that day, and everyone suddenly had volume in their voices. Cheering, smiles, questions. What did you sell? That's amazing. You're doing so good. I watched it happen the way you watch a pattern you've seen 100 times, not shocked, just tired. I ate my food. I smiled when someone looked at me, and I felt that familiar hollow space in my chest settle into place again. That was the real currency in our family, I realized. Not affection, need. If you needed something, you got attention. If you were accomplishing something quietly, you became background. I had been background for years, until they wanted something. I didn't open the texts, but the phone kept buzzing anyway, new messages arriving like waves that refused to stop. Eventually, I did what I always did when my head started to spin. I started my day. Shower, skincare, work clothes, lunch packed in a glass container, a small routine that made me feel like my life was mine. By mid-morning, the silence in my condo was replaced by the focused quiet of work. I logged in, checked my schedule, joined my first call. I didn't mention anything to anyone. I didn't want comfort or advice. I didn't want to be talked out of my own clarity. At noon, when I finally took a break, I looked at the messages. The first few were exactly what I expected. What is this? Are you serious? You think you can send us a bill? Then my mother. Call me right now. Then my father, which still felt strange to see. This is upsetting your mother. Then my sister again, longer this time. I can't believe you'd do this. After everything we've done for you. You're acting like you're better than us. I read them calmly, like I was reading something that wasn't mine. Because the truth was, I had been paying into their system so long that they couldn't imagine the payments stopping. They couldn't imagine me stepping out of the role. My sister had always been the center. Not because she demanded it loudly every day, but because everyone arranged themselves around her needs like it was the natural order. Her kids, her business, her crises. There was always a crisis. If her boutique had a slow week, it was a crisis. If a supplier messed up, it was a crisis. If she fought with her boyfriend, it was a crisis. If she needed an afternoon off, it was a crisis. And every crisis came with an unspoken expectation. Someone would cover it. That someone was usually me. Not because I had the most money, I didn't. Not early on. It was because I was reliable. Because I didn't create additional problems when I solved one. Because I didn't yell. Because I didn't demand credit. The family treated that like a resource, like something that belonged to them. I stared at my sister's message for a moment, then put the phone down again. No reply. That was step one, even if I hadn't labeled it yet. Step 1. No engagement in chaos. I went back to work. The rest of the day passed with the strange feeling of living two lives at once. In one life, I was reviewing reports, setting timelines, talking to colleagues about normal problems. In the other life, a storm was circling my phone. By evening, the messages shifted. The outrage didn't work, so they tried something softer. My mother texted, "I'm worried about you. This isn't like you. Please talk to us." Then, "You're breaking my heart." Then, "I didn't raise you to be like this." I leaned back on my couch with my laptop closed and let the words sit there on the screen. I didn't feel the usual pull, the usual reflex to fix it. Maybe because I was tired, or maybe because I could finally see what the guilt was. Not a moral truth, a tool, a way to put me back in place. I stood up, walked to my kitchen, and started making a simple dinner. Rice simmering, vegetables sizzling lightly in a pan, the small sound of oil and heat. My phone rang again. My mother. I let it ring until it stopped. Then it rang again. My sister. Then my father again, which meant they were coordinating. I didn't answer any of them. Silence, I realized, wasn't passive. It was an action. I ate dinner at my counter, slowly, in the calm light of my kitchen. I washed the dishes as soon as I was done. I wiped the counter. I moved through my space like I was protecting it. Later, I opened my laptop again, not to add to the spreadsheet, but to look at what I'd already done. The PDF was still there in my folder, neatly named. It looked professional. Cold, maybe, but accurate. And that was what made them frantic. Not the tone, not the attitude, the accuracy. They could argue with feelings, they could fight with emotion, but numbers and dates were harder to bully. I watched the screen for a moment, then closed the laptop gently. I didn't need to do more that night. I just needed to hold the line. I set my phone back down, face down again, and sat in the quiet until my breathing slowed. Then, finally, I heard the sound I'd been waiting for. A new message. And the sender name made my stomach go still. It was my father. He didn't call. He wrote, "Your mother wants to come by tomorrow. She says this needs to be handled in person." I read it once, then again. And I didn't respond right away. I just sat there, letting the weight of it settle, knowing exactly what in person meant in my family. It meant pressure. It meant a scene. It meant them trying to take back control. I looked around my living room, at the neat throw blanket on the couch, at the calm order of my space, and I made a decision without speaking it out loud. Then I waited. I didn't answer my father's message right away. I read it, set the phone down, and stood up. Not because I was panicking, but because my body recognized the old pattern. In person was never about resolution. It was about momentum. It was about showing up so I could be cornered into agreeing to something before I had time to think. I walked to my front door and checked the lock, even though I knew it was locked. The deadbolt clicked under my fingers, solid and final. Then I went back to my desk. In my job, when something starts to drift into chaos, you don't argue with it. You document. You define what's allowed. You create a channel. You make it boring and procedural until it loses oxygen. So I did what I always did at work. I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it Family Contact Log. Inside it, I made subfolders, screenshots, call history statements, notes. It felt strange, turning my personal life into a case file. But the longer I stared at those unread messages, the more I understood something. They had already turned it into a transaction. I was just responding in the only language that had ever moved them. I picked up my phone and started taking screenshots, slowly, methodically, the invoice, the "you owe us" message, the missed call list, the texts that followed, each one shifting its tone like a salesman trying different pitches. I saved everything into the folder. Then I opened a simple document and began a timeline. Not dramatic, not emotional, just facts. Date, time, sender, content summary. By the time I finished, it was after midnight again. My apartment was quiet except for the soft clicking of my keyboard and the occasional sound of a car below. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. There was a clean satisfaction in it. Not pleasure, not revenge. Order. On my phone, another message arrived. This time it was my mother. Please don't do this. Your dad and I are coming by tomorrow morning. We need to talk face to face like adults. I didn't respond. I waited until the next morning, after I'd slept, after I'd had coffee, after my mind felt steady again. Then I wrote one message. Not in the family group chat, not to everyone. I sent it directly to my father because he was the one who had tried to make it sound reasonable. Dad, no one is coming to my home. I'm not available for in-person conversations. If you need to discuss money, do it in writing. Email only. I stared at it for a second before sending. It was firm, but not cruel. I hit send. Immediately, I felt the familiar reflex to explain more, to soften it, to add a paragraph that would make it easier for them to accept. I didn't. That reflex was part of the old system, too. If I gave them extra words, they would treat them like openings, like negotiation points, so I left it clean. Email only. Then I did the next thing. I opened my email settings and created a rule that filtered messages from my family into a separate folder. Not because I wanted to ignore them forever, but because I needed control over when I engaged. I also turned on my building's visitor settings in the resident portal. My condo building had a front desk and a security log. Visitors had to be announced. I added a note for the front desk staff. Do not allow anyone to access my floor without my confirmation. No exceptions. I didn't include the details. I didn't need to. Building staff didn't need a story. They needed instructions. By late morning, my phone started again. Not calls at first, which surprised me. Texts. My sister. This is insane. You're really going to do this? Mom is crying. You think you're so professional now, like we're your clients. I read them without reacting. I didn't reply. Then my mother texted again. We're coming anyway. I stared at that line longer than I wanted to. It wasn't a request. It was a reminder of how they saw me. My home wasn't my home in their minds. It was just another place they could walk into when they wanted access to me. I didn't argue. I called the front desk. The woman who answered had a calm voice and sounded like she'd handled 1,000 small dramas in 1,000 units. "Hi," I said. "This is Marissa Clark in 1407. I just want to confirm my visitor restrictions are on." "Yes, Ms. Clark," she said. "They're active." "Good," I said. "If anyone shows up today asking for me, please let them know I'm not accepting visitors." "Understood." I hung up and stood in my kitchen for a moment, letting the quiet settle. My coffee mug was warm against my palm. The sunlight was bright on my counter. Normal. That was what I wanted. Normal. Around 1 o'clock, I got a notification from the building app. Visitor request, Richard Clark and Diane Clark. My parents. They were downstairs. My chest stayed calm, but my mind sharpened. I could almost picture it. My mother holding her purse tight. My father standing just behind her, neutral expression, letting her take the lead. I didn't respond to the request right away. I watched it sit there, waiting for my approval. I imagined the front desk employee glancing up at them, waiting for my answer too. This was new. This part. The pause where someone else had to wait on my decision. 2 minutes passed. Another notification. Visitor request, Brianna Clark. My sister had come too. I didn't feel anger. I felt something closer to confirmation. They weren't coming to talk. They were coming to surround. I took a slow breath, opened the app, and tapped the option that said, Decline. A few seconds later, I received a message from the front desk. They are asking if you can please come down. They say it's urgent. I typed back one line. No, please ask them to leave. Then I set my phone down and waited, standing in my living room with the curtains half open, listening to the quiet like it was a shield. A minute later, another message. They are refusing to leave. They are saying you are being unreasonable. I stared at that line and felt the old pressure try to climb into my throat. The urge to go down and smooth it over, to make it stop, to manage everyone's feelings so the noise would end. I didn't move. I picked up the phone again, not to call them, but to call the front desk. "Hi," I said, keeping my voice even. "If they refuse to leave, please follow your protocol." There was a brief pause, then the woman's tone stayed polite. "Yes, Ms. Clark, we will." I hung up and stood still. Then I heard it, faintly, even from 14 floors up. Not the words, but the sound. A raised voice. My mother, most likely. The sharp edge she saved for service workers when she didn't get what she wanted. Then a deeper voice, probably my father, trying to sound calm while still backing her up. Then another voice, higher and faster. My sister. It all blurred together into something I'd heard my whole life. Emotion as a weapon, volume as leverage. I didn't respond. I went back to my desk. I opened the timeline document and added a new entry. Date, time, visitor request declined, front desk note, refusal to leave. I typed it as calmly as if I were logging a delayed shipment. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a notification from the building app. Incident report created. I tapped it and read the short summary. Front desk had asked them to leave. They refused. Security had been called. They left after being warned they would be trespassed. I sat there looking at the screen, my hands resting on the edge of my desk. For the first time, the boundary wasn't just something I said, it was something enforced. I closed the report and saved a copy in my folder. Then I did something small and ordinary. I washed my coffee mug. I dried it. I put it back in the cabinet. And when my phone buzzed again a minute later, I didn't flinch. I picked it up and saw a new message from my father. Just 6 words. "This is going too far, Marissa." I read it once, then set the phone face down again. Then I waited. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:12 a.m. It was my mother. I watched it vibrate across the nightstand for a full cycle before I picked it up. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I needed to hear which version of her was showing up today. I answered and put it on speaker while I made oatmeal. The kettle clicked in the background, the kind of small home sounds that made her intensity feel even more out of place. Oh, thank God, she said, breathy and fragile, like she'd been sitting in the dark waiting for my call. I'm fine, I said. Fine? Her voice tightened immediately. The softness was gone, replaced by something sharper. How can you be fine? Do you have any idea what you did yesterday? Your sister hasn't slept. Your father is furious. The building called us like we were criminals. I stirred the oats slowly. My hand was steady. You showed up at my home after I said no, I said. That's not a misunderstanding. That's ignoring a boundary. Boundary, she repeated, as if the word itself was disrespectful. Marissa, this is family. You don't treat family like strangers. I kept my tone even. You sent me an invoice for $6,000 with no explanation. That's not family either. That's a demand. She made a sound like she was trying to hold back tears, but I recognized the shape of it. She used emotion the way some people used volume. Not always consciously. It was just the language she trusted most. We raised you, she said. We fed you. We gave you a home. And now you're going to send us paperwork like we're doing something wrong? Yes, I said. Because the paperwork is accurate. There was a pause. Then her voice dropped into something quieter, almost confidential. Your sister is in trouble, she said. Real trouble. The boutique is failing. She's behind on everything. We thought with your promotion, with your new salary, you could help her. Help us. And there it was, clean and simple. My success wasn't something they wanted to celebrate. It was something they wanted to access. I swallowed a bite of oatmeal and set the spoon down. My finances are mine, I said. Brianna's business is hers. If she needs help, she can talk to a financial advisor or her bank. She can also pay back what she owes me. My mother's voice went cold. You're really doing this, she said. You're really going to turn your back on us. I'm not turning my back, I said. I'm stepping out of a role I never agreed to permanently. She exhaled sharply, like she was trying to reset. Who put these ideas in your head? She asked. Is it your job? Your friends? You've changed? You used to be sweet. I didn't argue with that word, sweet. I knew what she meant. Compliant. I'm still the same person, I said. I'm just not available for this anymore. She tried one last time. So what do you want, Marissa? She asked. What is the end goal here? I looked down at the pot on the stove, at the oatmeal thickening at the edges. I answered plainly. I want written communication only, I said. No calls, no showing up, no messages in the group chat. If anyone wants to discuss money, they can email me. She laughed once, short and bitter. You think you can control how we talk to you, she said. I can control how I respond, I said. That's the point. I ended the call before it turned into a loop, not dramatically, just cleanly. Then I sat at my desk and wrote down what had just happened in my timeline. Date, time, incoming call, key statements, the new admission that Brianna's boutique was failing and they wanted access to my salary. I stared at the document for a moment, then I opened a new one. This is where my thinking shifted into steps, the way it always did when a situation needed structure. Step 1. No engagement in chaos. I had already done that. Step 2. Move communication into a controlled channel. Email only. Document everything. Step 3. Add a third party. Not for drama, for enforcement. I didn't want to fight. I wanted quiet. And quiet, with my family, had never happened without someone official in the room. So that afternoon, during my lunch break, I called a local attorney, a small firm, the kind that answered with a real person, not a long menu. The lawyer I spoke to was named Ms. Kendricks. Her voice was calm and direct, like she'd heard variations of this story 100 times. I gave her the outline, the invoice, the messages, the calls, the attempted visit, the building incident report. I told her I wasn't trying to sue anyone. I just needed the contact to stop. This is boundary enforcement, she said. Not escalation for the sake of it. A formal cease and desist letter is usually the right first move. It creates a record. It puts them on notice. I felt my shoulders drop slightly, like my body had been waiting for someone to confirm it was reasonable. I want it to be clear, I said. No calls, no texts, no showing up, written communication only. Understood, she said. We'll make it specific. Dates, times, the unwanted contact. Also, we'll route future contact through my office. She drafted it the same day. When she emailed it to me, I read it slowly at my desk. It wasn't dramatic. It was precise. It listed their attempts to contact me, the visit to my building, and my stated request for written communication only. It said further direct contact could be considered harassment. It instructed them to direct any correspondence to her office. I didn't feel excited reading it. I felt protected, like someone had finally built a fence where I'd been standing alone. I approved it with one reply. Please send. She sent it by certified mail to my parents' address and to Brianna's. Then I waited. The silence was immediate, not partial, complete. No calls, no texts, no messages in the group chat. For the first 2 days, my nervous system didn't believe it. I still checked my phone too often. I still flinched when it buzzed with an email from work. By day 5, the silence started to feel real. By day 8, I realized something unsettling. They weren't quiet because they suddenly understood. They were quiet because they were thinking. I went through my normal routines anyway. Work, gym, groceries, laundry folded into neat stacks while a podcast played softly in the background. And then, on the 10th day, it happened. I was in a meeting, listening to someone talk through a project timeline, when my phone vibrated with a notification I hadn't seen in a long time. It was from my credit monitoring app. I glanced down expecting something routine, the kind of alert you dismiss without thinking, but the words on the screen made my stomach go still. Fraud alert. A credit card application was submitted in your name. I stared at it, not moving. Then I saw the second line. Requested credit limit, $20,000. I excused myself from the meeting without explaining. I walked into the hallway, where the light was harsher and the air felt cooler. My thumb hovered over the alert, and before I opened it, I already knew one thing. The silence hadn't been peace. It had been planning. I stood in the hallway outside the conference room with my phone in my hand and read the fraud alert twice, slowly, like the second read might make it less real. It didn't. I tapped into the details. A credit card application had been submitted online. My name, my date of birth, my social security number, a requested limit of $20,000. My first thought wasn't panic. It was a quiet, practical question. How did they get the information? Then the answer came just as quietly. They already had it. They always had. I walked farther down the hall until I found an empty office with the lights off. I stepped inside, shut the door, and called the number listed in the alert. A bank representative answered after a short hold. Her voice was professional and alert, like she'd been trained to keep people calm. She confirmed what I already suspected. Yes, ma'am. An application was submitted about 20 minutes ago. Was it approved? I asked. It is pending verification. We flagged it because your monitoring service sent an alert. I took a breath, controlled and even. Can you read me the mailing address on the application? She did. It wasn't mine. It was Brianna's address. I didn't feel surprised. I felt something sharper than surprise, something clean and final. I asked the representative to freeze the application immediately. She explained the next steps: a fraud report, identity verification, and, if I chose, a police report. When she asked if I wanted to proceed with a formal fraud claim, I said yes, without hesitation. Then she asked the question that changed the temperature in the room. Would you like to report this to law enforcement now? I paused, not because I was protecting Brianna, but because I needed to do this in the right order. Not yet, I said. First, I need to document everything. She told me what I could request: confirmation emails, reference numbers, timestamps. I wrote them down in my notes app, exactly as she said them. When the call ended, I didn't go back into the meeting. I emailed my manager one sentence: "I have an urgent personal issue and need to step out. I'll follow up shortly." Then I walked to my car, drove home, and locked my front door behind me like I was sealing my life. In my condo, the air was still, the kind of still that makes you hear your own breathing. I opened my laptop and created another folder inside my case file: fraud evidence. I took screenshots of the alert. I saved the email confirmation from the bank. I wrote down the call log from my phone with the timestamp. I typed a clean summary of what the representative had confirmed, including the address. I didn't embellish. I didn't editorialize. I built it like a file someone else could read and understand in 60 seconds. Then I called Ms. Kendricks. She answered on the second ring. "Marissa," she said, like she already knew it wasn't a casual call. "A credit card application was submitted in my name today," I said. The mailing address was my sister's. There was a brief pause, then her voice stayed steady. "Did you freeze it?" "Yes." "Good," she said. "This is no longer just unwanted contact. This is identity theft." "I know," I said. "Do you want to file a police report?" she asked. "I'm going to," I said. "But first I want one controlled conversation. One. Not to argue, not to negotiate feelings, just to state consequences and terms." "I understand," she said. "If you do that, do it with a witness and do it in writing. Better yet, do it through my office." "I want them to hear it," I said. All at once, she exhaled softly, then gave me a plan that sounded like something she had used before. "Conference call," she said. "Record it if your state allows, or take contemporaneous notes. Keep it brief, present options, then end the call." I didn't ask what options meant. I already knew what my options were. I had just been trying not to think about them. I checked the state recording rules quickly and decided not to record. I didn't need audio to make this real. I had the application, the address, the bank's reference number. I opened a blank page and wrote 2 headings: Option A, Option B. Under Option A, I wrote what I wanted most: separation, formalized, enforced. Under Option B, I wrote the inevitable next step: police report and prosecution. When it was clear on the page, I initiated a 3-way call. Actually, 4-way. My mother, my father, Brianna. They picked up in a staggered way, voices overlapping. "What is this?" my mother said, immediately wary. "Why are we all on the same call?" my father asked. Brianna didn't speak at first. I heard her breathing, quick and tight. "I'm glad I got all of you at once," I said. My voice stayed level, almost quiet. "This will be brief." "Marissa," my mother started, already loading up her tone, "we need to talk about how you've been behaving, because this is not normal, and you're scaring me." "No," I said, not harshly, just firmly. "We're not talking about my behavior. We're talking about a credit card application submitted today in my name." Silence. I continued. "At 2:11 p.m., a Capital One application was submitted online using my full legal name, my social security number, and my date of birth. The requested credit limit was $20,000. My father's voice changed slightly, like he was trying to calculate the right response. "Marissa, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about fraud," I said. The mailing address on the application was Brianna's. The silence that followed was thicker this time. Not confusion, recognition. I kept my voice calm. "Brianna," I said, "did you submit it?" A sound came through the line that was half sob, half gasp. "I didn't know what else to do," she said. "I was going to pay it back. I just needed time." My mother jumped in immediately. "She's under so much pressure," she said fast. "Her business is collapsing, she's drowning, and you're making it worse with these letters and this invoice nonsense. She's your sister." My father's voice was lower. "It was a mistake," he said. "This wasn't a mistake," I said. "It was a decision, and it's a felony. My mother made a small, wounded sound like I'd slapped her. "Don't say that word," she snapped. "Don't talk about your sister like she's a criminal." I didn't raise my voice. "I'm not calling her names," I said. "I'm stating what the bank called it: identity theft, credit fraud." Brianna started crying harder, words tumbling out. "I was desperate. You don't understand. I thought it would get approved and I could use it just to catch up, and then I'd fix it before you even noticed." "I noticed," I said, "because I monitor my credit, like an adult." My father tried again, softer now. "Okay," he said. "Okay, so what do you want? What's the point of this call?" This was the only moment I paused, not for drama, for precision. Then I spoke in steps, the way I did when a process needed to be clear. "Here is what is going to happen," I said. "You have two options." My mother inhaled sharply. "Options?" she repeated. "Yes," I said. "Option A. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the three of you will be at Ms. Kendrick's office in Charlotte. You will sign a legally binding agreement stating you will not contact me again, not by phone, not by text, not through my workplace, not in person, not through anyone else. You will acknowledge that you attempted fraud using my identity. In exchange, I will not file a police report for this incident." Brianna's crying turned into a small, frightened quiet. My mother whispered, "Marissa, you can't be serious." "I am," I said. "Option B. I file the police report tonight and provide them the evidence. The bank reference number, the address on the application, the timeline, and the statement from fraud services." My father didn't speak for a moment. Then his voice came out heavy, like something in him had finally landed. "If we do option A," he said slowly, "you'll leave her alone?" "If you sign the agreement and follow it," I said, "yes." My mother tried one last time. "You're destroying this family," she said, voice trembling. I didn't take the bait. "This family has been using me as a backup plan for years," I said. "I'm done being a plan." Brianna spoke, barely audible. "Please," she said. "Please don't call the police." I waited 2 seconds, long enough for the call to feel the weight of what was happening. Then my father said it. "We'll be there," he said. "We'll sign." "Good," I said. "Ms. Kendricks will send you the details." I didn't say goodbye. I didn't add comfort. I didn't soften it. I ended the call. Afterward, my condo felt even quieter than before, like the air had been cleaned. I emailed Ms. Kendricks a short note with the outcome and attached the fraud evidence folder. Then I closed my laptop and stood in my kitchen with a glass of water, looking out at the late afternoon light on the buildings across the street. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't celebrating. I was simply preparing for the next morning, because I knew what came next would need to be handled the same way. In a controlled room, with paper on the table. And no room for bargaining. The next morning, I arrived at Ms. Kendrick's office at 8:40 a.m. I parked 2 blocks away on purpose. I wanted the short walk. I wanted the air. I wanted the extra minute to stay inside my own body before I stepped into a room that used to make me feel 12 years old again. The office was on the second floor of a low brick building with plain glass doors and a small brass plaque. Inside, everything smelled faintly like paper and lemon cleaner. Quiet, controlled, a waiting room with 2 chairs, a water dispenser, and a small bowl of mints. I checked in without drama. The receptionist nodded like this was normal. In her world, it probably was. Ms. Kendricks met me at the door to the conference room and handed me a folder. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered structure. "They're here," she said. "They arrived early." I nodded once. When I walked into the conference room, they were already seated. My mother sat closest to the door, purse in her lap, hands clenched around it like it was an anchor. Her eyes were red and tired, but her posture still carried that same familiar edge, the one that said she wanted to be in control even when she wasn't. My father sat beside her, shoulders slumped slightly, staring at the table like it was something he could disappear into. Brianna sat across from them, arms folded tight over her chest. She kept her eyes down, fixed on the wood grain like she was trying to memorize it. No one spoke when I entered. I didn't greet them. I didn't need to. We weren't here for a family moment. We were here for an agreement. Ms. Kendricks sat at the head of the table. I sat at the far end, slightly angled so I didn't have to look directly at them the whole time. I placed my folder in front of me and kept my hands resting on it. Still, Ms. Kendricks began. Her voice was even, clear, and not interested in feelings. "This document is a mutual no-contact agreement," she said. "It outlines boundaries and legal consequences if those boundaries are violated." My mother's mouth tightened. She opened it, then closed it again. Ms. Kendricks continued. "It specifies that you will not contact Ms. Clark directly," she said, looking at all three of them. "No calls, no texts, no emails, no social media messages, no contact through third parties, and no contact at her residence or place of employment." My father swallowed. Brianna's foot bounced slightly under the table. "It also acknowledges," Ms. Kendricks said, "that an attempt was made to submit a credit application using Ms. Clark's identifying information without her consent." My mother's eyes snapped to mine. She looked like she wanted me to defend her from the shame of hearing it said out loud. I didn't move. Ms. Kendricks slid a second page forward. "This is the portion that matters most for enforceability," she said. "It includes names, dates, and the agreed consequences. If you violate this agreement, Ms. Clark retains the right to pursue legal action, including filing reports related to harassment or fraud." My mother finally spoke. "This is extreme," she said, voice strained. This is humiliating. We're sitting here like you're accountable," Ms. Kendricks said calmly, not unkind, just factual. Accountability often feels uncomfortable. My mother went quiet. Brianna's breathing was shallow. She kept staring at the table, like looking up might make her break. Ms. Kendricks turned another page. "There is also an acknowledgement of an outstanding financial dispute," she said. "Ms. Clark is agreeing to drop any claim for repayment of her documented ledger in exchange for permanent no contact. This is a concession she is offering. It benefits you." My father's face flickered. That line landed on him, not as insult, but as reality. My mother didn't react. Brianna's shoulders tightened. Ms. Kendricks looked at them. "If you do not wish to sign," she said, "you are free to leave. Ms. Clark will proceed with filing a police report and providing documentation to the bank and to law enforcement." No one moved. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint buzz of the overhead lights. My mother's eyes filled again, but this time the tears looked less like performance and more like collapse. Still, I didn't soften. Not because I wanted her to hurt, but because I had learned something important. When my family felt discomfort, they tried to hand it to me. I wasn't taking it anymore. My father cleared his throat. "Can we at least talk about this?" he said, looking at me for the first time. "Like, just between us." "No," Ms. Kendricks said before I had to. "The agreement is the conversation." Brianna whispered, barely audible. "I didn't mean to ruin you," she said. "I was just drowning." I looked at her then, not with anger, with something quieter. "I know you were drowning," I said. "You've been drowning for years, and you've been pulling at me like I was a life raft." My mother flinched at the metaphor, like it was too accurate. I kept my voice steady. "I'm not discussing motives," I said. "I'm protecting my life." Ms. Kendricks slid 3 pens across the table. "Sign here," she said, pointing to the highlighted lines. "Initial each page." My father picked up the pen first. His hand trembled slightly as he signed. He didn't look at me. He looked at the paper like it was the only thing keeping him upright. My mother hesitated longer. She held the pen but didn't move. "Marissa," she said softly, the old tone trying to return, the one that used to bend me. Please, we're your parents. I didn't respond, because any response would become an opening. Ms. Kendricks waited. She didn't speak. She didn't rush. Silence, in that room, belonged to me. Finally, my mother signed. Quick, angry strokes, like she wanted the pen to stab the page. Brianna signed last. Her signature was small and messy, like her hand didn't want to cooperate with her choices. When it was done, Ms. Kendricks gathered the pages and placed them in a folder. You will each receive a copy, she said. Any future contact will be handled through my office. My father stood up first. He looked older than I remembered. Not physically, exactly, just smaller. Like the role he'd always played, the quiet enabler, had finally reached its endpoint. My mother stood with him. Her face was tight, eyes glossy. She didn't speak to me. She looked at the wall behind me, like she couldn't bear to look straight at the person she couldn't control. Brianna stood slowly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. For a moment, I thought she might say something else. Something apologetic or pleading. She didn't. She just walked out. They left the conference room without a goodbye, without a scene, without a final attempt to pull me back. I watched the door close behind them. No triumph came, no rush of relief, just a quiet, clean emptiness. The kind you feel after you finally remove something heavy you didn't realize you were carrying every day. Ms. Kendricks turned to me. You did the right thing, she said, not as comfort, but as fact. I nodded once. Next steps, she said. Freeze your credit across all bureaus, change any shared passwords, document anything that happens. If they violate the agreement, call me. I will, I said. She handed me a copy of the signed agreement and the folder with the supporting documentation. It felt heavier than paper should feel, not in weight, in meaning. When I stepped outside, the morning air felt crisp and ordinary. A few cars moved through the intersection. Someone walked a dog across the street. The world didn't shift. Nothing dramatic happened. I got into my car and sat there for a full minute without turning the key. My hands rested on the steering wheel. I looked forward. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt quiet. And in that quiet, I noticed something new. A sense of ownership. Like my life was mine again, in a way it hadn't been since I could remember. I drove home. When I walked into my condo, I put the folder in my filing cabinet, shut the drawer, and locked it. Then I made tea. Not to celebrate, just to return to my day. As I stood at the counter waiting for the kettle to boil, my phone buzzed with a new alert. Not a call, not a text, an email notification. The sender wasn't my mother or my sister. It was my credit monitoring service again, and the subject line made me pause with my hand on the mug. New inquiry detected. I stared at it, still and calm, then tapped it open. The alert stayed on my screen while the kettle finished heating. New inquiry detected. I didn't feel panic this time. I felt routine. I set the mug down, opened my laptop at the kitchen counter, and logged into my credit monitoring account. The interface looked clean and neutral, like it didn't care what kind of day you were having. The inquiry was listed right there with a timestamp. A lender, a small one, not capital one this time. I clicked into the details and checked the address attached to it. It wasn't mine. It was Brianna's again. I didn't sit down. I didn't even sigh. I just watched the facts line up. A second attempt. Still using my name. Still using an address that did not belong to me. And now, because I'd already taken the boring steps, it didn't land as a crisis. It landed as confirmation. I opened the folder in my filing cabinet and pulled out the signed agreement. I read the line about unauthorized attempts to use my identity and the consequences of violating the terms. Then I called Ms. Kendricks. She answered with the same steady tone as always. I just received a new inquiry alert, I said. Different lender. Same address. Understood, she said. Do you have the report number and the timestamp? I do, I said. Email it to me, she said. Then I want you to place a hard freeze with all 3 bureaus today if you haven't already. Also, I recommend filing the police report now. The pattern matters. I paused for 1 second, not because I felt protective, but because the word police report still carried an old weight. Then I let the weight go. Okay, I said. I'll do it. That afternoon, I followed the steps like I was completing a work checklist. Step 1, I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. Step 2, I changed passwords on every financial account and turned on 2-factor authentication. Step 3, I filed an identity theft report and documented the timeline of both attempts. Step 4, I filed a police report, attached the screenshots, and included the lender address detail. The officer I spoke to wasn't dramatic about it. He was calm, almost bored, which was oddly comforting. He gave me a case number and told me what I could expect next. When it was done, I saved the case number in my folder and closed the drawer again. That night, I took out the trash. I wiped down my counters. I folded a load of laundry while a quiet playlist played in the background. Simple things. The next few days passed without any new alerts. No calls, no texts. The silence felt different now, not like a pause before impact, like an actual absence. At work, my life stayed normal. Meetings, emails, projects moving forward, people talking about weekend plans and restaurant recommendations. I went to the gym and listened to a podcast. I stopped by the grocery store and bought oranges and a loaf of bread. I came home and ate dinner at my counter with the windows open just a little, letting in the city sounds from below. Every now and then my mind tried to drift back to my parents' faces in that conference room, not with sadness exactly, with recognition. They had always been sure I would return to my role, the helpful one, the quiet one, the one who kept the system running. The agreement, the freeze, the report, all of it made one thing unavoidable. I wasn't returning. Over the next few weeks, Ms. Kendricks handled the follow-up. A formal notice went out referencing the signed agreement and the new inquiry. The police report existed now as a record, not a threat. The bank and the bureaus treated it as a standard fraud case and kept everything flagged. No dramatic scene, no big showdown, just procedures that worked. And in the background, something else changed too. My phone stopped feeling like a trap. I stopped checking it every few minutes. I started sleeping deeper. I noticed how quiet my mornings were. Not lonely quiet, peaceful quiet. One Saturday, I cleaned my apartment in slow, steady passes. I wiped the baseboards, reorganized a drawer, and finally shredded a stack of old mail I'd been avoiding. When I finished, I sat on my couch with a cup of tea and looked around at the clean surfaces and the soft light in my living room. This was what I had been protecting. Not money, not pride. Space. A life where my time belonged to me. A few months later, something small happened that stayed with me. A woman from work, a quiet analyst named Tessa, asked if I had a minute after a meeting. Her voice was careful, like she was testing whether it was safe to speak. We stood near the coffee machine in the break area. I could hear the hum of the fridge and the soft clink of someone stirring a mug. She told me her brother had been pressuring her to co-sign a loan. She said he kept calling her selfish when she hesitated. She said her parents were telling her to just help him once, just this one time, because family. She looked at me and said, "How do you say no without turning into the villain?" I didn't give her a speech. I didn't make it personal. I told her what I had learned. Say no once in writing, I said. Keep it short, don't debate. Move everything into a channel you can control, and document the pressure. If people only respect your boundaries when there are consequences, then consequences are part of the boundary. She nodded slowly, like something inside her had settled. As she walked away, I realized something. I wasn't the only person who had been trained to confuse loyalty with being used. There were a lot of people like me, quietly carrying other people's chaos until it became normal. That night, I went for a walk around my neighborhood. The air was cool, the sidewalks were clean. I passed a couple walking a dog and a woman watering plants on her balcony. Ordinary scenes that reminded me how life is supposed to feel. When I got back, I locked my door, put my phone on the charger, and made tea again. I stood in my kitchen in the soft light and listened to the quiet. No buzzing, no demands. Just my life, uninterrupted. If you've ever been treated like the family backup plan, I get it, and I'm glad you're here. If you want more stories like this, gently told and easy to listen to, tap like and subscribe. It helps this channel reach the people who need it. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. 2 of the most popular stories are coming up next, so you can just keep listening if you want to stay in this calm space a little longer.